Welcome back to another episode of What If Naruto Had a Big Brother? In this alternate Naruto universe, one small twist changes everything. What if Naruto wasn't alone? What if he grew up with someone stronger, smarter, and born to rewrite destiny itself? Today, we dive deeper into the story of Kaito Uzumaki, Naruto's powerful older brother whose existence shakes the entire Shinobi world. New alliances form, new enemies rise, and the future of Konoha may never be the same again. So sit back, relax, and get ready, because this episode is about to change everything. The evening passed with peaceful chaos, Naruto climbing everything he wasn't supposed to, Kaito chasing after him while half healing his bruised shoulder, Kushina cheerfully humming as she cooked. For a few hours, the world outside didn't exist. But when night fell and Kaito lay on his futon staring at the ceiling, the weight of tomorrow returned. Guarding the daimyo was supposed to be a formality, but nothing in this world ever stayed so simple. He closed his eyes, familiar tension settling back into his chest. Tomorrow's going to be troublesome. And with that thought, he drifted to sleep, unaware that the mission ahead of him would mark the beginning of a chain of events that would ripple far beyond anything Team 11 expected. Upon entering the house, Kaito called out, "Mom, I'm home." Kushina poked her head out from the living room with a warm smile. "Welcome back, honey." The now 3-year-old Naruto came barreling out of the living room like a tiny blonde missile and crashed straight into his brother's legs, arms wrapping around Kaito's waist with all his toddler strength. Kushina joined the hug, folding both of her boys in her arms until Kaito felt like he might suffocate from affection alone. After breaking apart, Kushina immediately slipped into her usual teasing mode. "So how was my daughter-in-law today?" she asked innocently, eyes sparkling with mischief. Kaito let out a long, exhausted sigh as his shoulders slumped. He didn't even have the energy to argue anymore. "Mom." The sun had barely begun to rise over the village when Konoha lay silent in the pre-dawn quiet. The moon still lingered in the sky, casting a soft blue tint across empty streets. At this hour, only ANBU and insomniacs were awake, and Kaito Uzumaki. In his room, Kaito stood before his mirror, tightening his headband and checking every piece of gear with practiced precision. Once satisfied, he slid the last strap into place and headed into the kitchen. There, as expected, Kushina was already awake, packing bento boxes with her usual morning energy. Her green dress and white blouse swayed lightly as she moved between pots and containers. "Good morning, Mom," Kaito greeted, unable to stop the small smile tugging at his lips. Kushina looked up, her bright red hair shining under the lantern light. "Good morning, honey. Breakfast is ready, eat before you go," she said warmly. Kaito sat, offering a grateful itadakamasu before digging into the fluffy tamagoyaki and freshly steamed rice. Kushina's cooking always tasted like comfort. When he finished, he reached into his pouch, pulled out one of his chakra-suppressing seals, and created a shadow clone. The clone placed the seal on its chest and activated it, glowing faintly blue. "You know what to do," Kaito instructed firmly. The clone saluted dramatically. Aye, Captain." Kaito blinked. Why are my clones always like this?" Kushina only laughed. After hugging his mother goodbye, Kushina handed him a bento, then another container filled with steaming hot takoyaki. "Something for the road," she said proudly. Kaito grinned. "You're the best, why no?" Immediately, the clone protested loudly, "Hey! Why does he get takoyaki? That's favoritism." Kushina patted the clone's head. "Don't worry, I saved some for you." The clone gasped and sprinted to the kitchen like his life depended on it. The original just sighed. He left the house, Kushina waving until he disappeared from view, still smiling softly. Kaito moved effortlessly through the forest canopy, the warm takoyaki container balanced in one hand as he popped a piece into his mouth. The crispy exterior and savory filling made him hum with satisfaction. Approaching the Hyuga compound, he sensed Hotaru's presence and landed gracefully in front of her. "Good morning, Hotaru-chan. Hope I didn't keep you waiting," he said with a light smile. Her cheeks immediately tinted pink. "Good morning, Kaito-kun. I just arrived. He held out the takoyaki. Want some? Mom made it. Hotaru blinked, then eagerly accepted. The moment she bit into it, she let out a soft, delighted hum. They walked side by side through the slowly waking village, chatting about nothing and everything. The sky brightened, the villagers began their day, and for a moment, it felt peaceful. 20 minutes later, they arrived at the main gate, spotting Itachi leaning calmly against the wall, eyes closed. "Yo, Itachi," Kaito called. Itachi opened his eyes, gave a small nod, and accepted a piece of takoyaki Kaito offered without comment. Hotaru offered him a smile, which he returned politely. Shikaku arrived moments later, yawning loudly. "Morning," he muttered. They all greeted him, and after a quick check, Shikaku waved them forward. "All right, let's get moving." Their journey toward the capital was smooth, hopping across branches in synchronized motion. Kaito could sense Kakashi and his ANBU squad shadowing them, discreet, but not discreet enough for Kagura's mind-eye. Unable to resist, Kaito flickered beside Kakashi mid-route. "Yo, Kakashi. Long time no see," he greeted casually. Kakashi sighed beneath his mask. "You shouldn't sneak up on ANBU, you know." "You weren't surprised?" Kaito smirked. "Come visit later, YA no. Mom's worried about you." Kakashi paused midair, just slightly. "I'll try." "You better," Kaito added before flickering back to Team 11. 2.5 hours later, the towering capital of the Land of Fire came into view, vibrant, bustling, alive. Vendors shouted, children ran, samurai marched, and the scent of festival food filled the air. Shikaku led them to the palace gates, where one of the 12 guardian ninja stood watching. Kaito barely spared him a glance, already knowing their reputation. Strong, yes, but far from the level of monsters he would face in the future. Inside the palace, after a long wait, the daimyo appeared with sluggish steps and a tired expression. Team 11 bowed deeply. With a nod, the daimyo signaled them forward, and the procession moved out, his ornate palanquin carried past the crowds. Kaito, Itachi, and Hotaru positioned themselves around the daimyo, forming a loose protective circle. Shikaku took the rear, hands tucked in his pockets, steps too casual for someone guarding royalty. The moment they left the palace grounds, the air shifted, the chatter fading into murmurs, the city noise blending into a steady hum. The mission had begun. And somewhere, deep inside Kaito's gut, a familiar uneasy churn warned him that this escort wouldn't stay peaceful for long. Kaito's feet blurred as he vanished from sight, leaves and moonlight whipping past him in a streak of red. The single word, "Mom," hammered through his chest like a war drum, and everything else narrowed to that one thread. He moved without thinking, instincts and fear coiling into a single, savage purpose. He skidded to a halt several blocks away from the Uzumaki residence, chest heaving. His Kagura's mind's eye pinged wildly, a dozen chakra signatures scattered through the alleys, some small and frantic, one steady and low and wrong. He tasted metal on the air. "No," he breathed. Kaito created 2 shadow clones with a breathless hand sign and sent them running different routes to sweep the area. The original dashed roof to roof, every step a prayer and a promise. The village felt wrong tonight, an ache beneath the surface, like someone had struck a bell and the echo wouldn't stop. He hit the yard in a single bound, sliding down the slick eaves and rolling into the front doorway. The house was a mess. Cushions scattered, kimono fabric torn and stained, a trail of disrupted tatami leading toward the back room. The sharp tang of burned paper hung in the air. "Naru." Kaito's voice was raw as he tore down the corridor. In the living room, one of his clones crouched protectively over a small bundle of blankets. It sprang up and saluted, a perfect copy of calm on the surface, and then dissolved as Kaito's eyes fell to the crib. Naruto lay inside, blinking, cheeks wet where a tear had fallen into the folds of the blanket. He was unharmed. For a heartbeat Kaito could not breathe. Then he heard the sound that froze him colder than any winter wind, Kushina's breath, shallow, hitched, not right. He broke into the bedroom. Kushina lay on the floor, hair splayed like a flame across the tatami, a smear of dark staining the sleeve near her side. Her green dress was torn where something sharp had grazed her. Her hands moved weakly as if trying to pull herself up. When she turned her head, her eyes found Kaito's and widened with a mixture of shame and relief. "Kaito-kun," she whispered, voice a wafer. He dropped to his knees beside her, fingers trembling as he checked her wound. It wasn't deep, a graze, a slash that missed anything vital, but her breathing was shallow because she had been chloroformed. The cloth, damp and reeking faintly of some anesthetic, lay crumpled near the window. Someone had come through the back. "Where?" Kaito's words came out like broken glass. Kushina's lips moved. "Took something. Left a mark." She pointed, with effort, to the futon where an empty wooden box had been. Kaito shot up, scanning the room with Kagura's mind's eye. The seal Kushina and he had used, the one that erased his usual traces, flickered on the edge of his vision. Someone had bypassed it. Someone had known where to cut through. Rage and cold logic braided together in his chest. One of his clones, the stealth-sealed one he'd left with Kushina, returned then, breathless and small as it knelt beside him. "Boss," it said, voice clipped. "ANBU footprints outside. And there are traces. Mask, same pattern." Kaito's stomach dropped into an abyss. The pattern matched the masked man's zebra-striped orange mask, the one who'd just eluded them. He slammed his palm into the floor, iron in anger. "What did they take?" he demanded. The clone shook its head. "Nothing obvious. But there's residue, a small iron box, gone from the drawer where Lady Kushina kept scrolls. There's also a patch stuck to the window. It melted, like a sealing compound forced open." Kaito's hand went to his mouth. His mind sprinted through possibilities. Seals. Scrolls. Something small but important. Maybe a key, maybe a token. The masked man had said his name, had spoken of Kakashi, had toyed with them. Now he'd been in Kaito's home. He glanced at Kushina. Her smile, though weak, was fierce. "I'm fine," she breathed. You were impressive. You protected Naruto." Kaito's jaw worked. He wanted to demand she stay in bed forever, to wrap her in chakra and never let anyone close again. Instead he smiled, brittle and raw. "I won't let anyone touch you again. I swear it." Kushina's fingers found his, squeezing once. "Kaito-kun, be careful." He barely registered the murmur of hurried footsteps outside until Kakashi's silhouette filled the doorway. The silver-haired ANBU leader moved like a shadow, eyes sharp even behind the mask. Behind him came Shikaku, breathing hard, and Hayashi, stoic and white-faced, all of them mirroring the storm inside Kaito. Kakashi's single visible eye flicked to Kushina, then to Kaito. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice low. "Just a scratch," Kaito snapped, then softer. "They were here. He was here." Shikaku's expression hardened. "Who?" Kaito flung himself to his feet. Mask. Orange. Stripes. One eye hole. He used genjutsu on the daimyo's escort. He targeted. Kaito's throat closed around the words. He could not say how close they'd been to being ripped apart by that blade. "He said he'd kill me next time." He mentioned Kakashi. Kakashi's mouth tightened. "He recognized me," he murmured. "That means he knows a lot more about our pasts than he should." Hayashi's voice was a growl. "Any sign who he served?" "No," Kaito said. "But root Anbu movements, the timing, this was planned. And he went after something here." Shikaku turned to the clone that had been left in the house. "Your order." The clone saluted. "I kept watch. I heard him slip away toward the east road. He used an eye hole in the mask like a portal, disappeared into it." Kakashi's eye sharpened. "A sealing technique linked to the mask," he said quietly. "He used a hollow space seal, or something similar. That's dangerous, and rare." Kaito felt the air go thin. A hollow space seal that could swallow a man? The idea stabbed at a dozen memories in his head. Mist strikes, things passing through, the way the masked man had laughed as if pain meant nothing to him. "Where's Naruto?" Hayashi demanded suddenly, gaze snapping back to the crib. Kushina's hand moved and pointed weakly. Naruto clutched a small toy in his fists, eyes heavy with sleep but alive. Kaito dropped to his knees beside the crib and ruffled his little brother's hair, relief so fierce it made his vision blur. Naruto looked up, squinted at Kaito, and then crawled into his arms with complete trust. The world narrowed to the warmth of that weight. "Good," Hayashi breathed. Kakashi stared at Kaito then, one eye intense. "You did well tonight. You stayed sharp." Kaito's mouth went hard. "He nearly." "I know." Kakashi's voice softened. "We'll find him. We'll find this masked man and whoever backs him. But you need to rest long enough to get your wound sewn up. You're not invincible, Kaito." Kaito scoffed, half defiant, half tired. "Never said I was." Outside, a distant smoke column curled toward the moon, the same direction Kaito had last glimpsed the masked man slip into. Shikaku's jaw clenched. "Troublesome," he muttered, eyes flicking to the window. Kaito looked down at Kushina, at Naruto, and felt the old ember of vengeance, not childish spite now, but a cold vow tempered by fear. The masked man was not just a blade and a stage trick. He had come here with purpose, taken something that mattered, and had left a trail that led to more of the same. Kaito rose, shoulders squared. "I want to go after him," he said. Kakashi's mask tilted. "Not alone." Kaito's answer was immediate. "Neither do I want to be alone." Shikaku's eyes narrowed with that familiar, weary patience. "Then gather yourselves. We move at dawn. Anyone left in their beds will stay there. This is not a one-kid job." Kaito's heart hammered. He could already feel the gears of the village turning, ANBU teams waking, messengers running, questions to be asked of the Hokage and of men who like to work unseen. But under it all was a sharper truth. Someone had breached the Uzumaki home. Someone had whispered his family's life into the dark. Kaito pressed little Naruto to his chest. The child's breath warmed him, steady and innocent. "No one touches my family," he said, voice a blade wrapped in cotton. "Not ever." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of pine and smoke and something metallic beyond the trees. The hunt had begun. Shikaku moved through the Hokage tower with that slow, efficient gait of his, every step measured, every thought catalogued. The corridors felt smaller tonight, crowded by the weight of what had happened. The air smelled faintly of pipe smoke and worry. He found Hiruzen behind his desk, the third Hokage's face lit by a single lamp and shadowed by sleeplessness. "Hokage-sama," Shikaku began without preamble, "troublesome incident on the road. Masked man, orange mask, appeared during the daimyo escort. My team engaged. He used a powerful genjutsu, even the ANBU were affected. He escaped through some kind of spatial seal. Kaito sighted him. He then returned to his home. His with Lady Kushina now. She and Naruto are alive." Kaito passed out from exhaustion. Hiruzen's pipe paused mid-air. For a long moment the old man simply stared, exhaled smoke, and then nodded once as if committing Shikaku's words to bone. "Show me the details," he said softly. "All of them." Shikaku told the story as he saw it. Mask, killing intent, the way Itachi and Hotaru held out against the illusion, Kaito's furious charge, the strange intangibility of the man, and the mask's black hole. Hiruzen listened, brow furrowing deeper as each piece fell into place. When Shikaku finished, the room held a silence so loud it throbbed. A spacetime technique combined with genjutsu and, Hiruzen pinched the bridge of his nose, someone intimate with our village. He recognized Kakashi. He mentioned Kushina's name. This is not a random criminal. Shikaku's fingers tightened around the scroll he carried. "I agree. He's dangerous, and he knows too much. He may be linked to that old attack the Fourth, and to whatever men still move in the shadows of Konoha." Kakashi appeared in the doorway without sound. Kakashi had gone ahead to the Hokage's office after the initial chaos. His single visible eye was steady, serious. "We detained 2 suspicious Anbu en route back to the village," he reported. "They were burnt and their features destroyed. The usual protocol. Whoever organized this wanted both deniability and a spectacle. I'll need time to interrogate the Kumo Jonin we captured earlier. He may hold useful information." Hiruzen nodded. "Coordinate with Shikaku. Double the guard around Uzumaki residence. Place the Hyuga compound on alert. Send word to the Reikage. We will not escalate, but we will not be bullied either. I want every route operative located and questioned. And Kakashi, find out what the masked man meant about me." Kakashi's single eye flicked toward Hiruzen, an unreadable shadow passing over his features. "Understood." Shikaku bowed and left, his mind already 2 steps ahead. Reinforcements, statements, seals. He passed the guard post without stopping, and the village breathed a little easier knowing its leaders were moving. Back at the Uzumaki house, Kushina sat beside the futon, braid unraveled, hands clenched in her lap. The bandage on her arm was fresh, the anesthetic had been reversed, and the shock was settling into a tired, tremulous relief. Naruto slept in Kaito's arms, small and warm and oblivious to the storm his family had weathered. Kaito lay on a rolled blanket, burned shoulder bandaged, his chest rising and falling with long, uneven breaths. When he opened his eyes, they were rimmed red but hard as flint. He blinked up at Kushina. For a moment the vulnerability of the child fell away and left the man who refused to be helpless. "Did they?" he started, voice hoarse. Kushina answered before he could finish. "They were here. They took something small. I don't know what. But we're safe. That matters." Kaito's jaw worked. He pictured the mask's single eye hole, the man's casual cruelty, and the way his tanto had cleaved air. "He will come again," Kaito said, "not a question this time. And I'll be ready." Kushina's hand smoothed his hair, amused and terrified both. "You always were dramatic. But be careful, Kaito. Promise me you'll listen to Shikaku and Kakashi." He nodded, because he could do no other. "I promise." Kakashi stayed long enough to exchange the information he'd gathered: footprints, an intercepted message, unusual seal residue found near the palace gates, then slipped away to the Anbu barracks. Shikaku returned with official orders: increased patrols, every sealing expert to examine Kushina's missing drawer, and a restricted perimeter around anyone with ties to the Uzumaki or Hyuga. The village must look secure. Hayashi came by as well, grey robes billowing, composure regained. He bowed to Kushina with stiff courtesy, but his eyes softened at sight of Naruto. "My daughter is unhurt," he said. "For that, I am grateful. We owe much to Kaito." Hotaru appeared beside Hayashi, cheeks still a pale wash from the encounter but steadier now. She reached for Kaito with a shy, fierce affection. "You scared me," she murmured. Kaito smiled. "A tired, crooked thing. You should see the face I made when I thought I lost you. Not pretty." They all laughed once, brief and brittle, and the sound felt like a small weapon against the dark. That night the Hokage tower did not sleep. Sealing experts were consulted, watchers posted, and messengers ran with cryptic orders. Hiruzen sat long into the small hours with maps and reports, weighing prisoners' words and the shards of truth that pierced the darkness. Outside the windows, the moon carved silver paths across roofs. In the quiet, Kaito sat awake with Naruto curled in his arms, a silent promise nesting in his chest that whatever had come for his family, Konoha would answer. The hunt had begun, and the village, for all its old scabs and older secrets, would not stand idly while one of its own was threatened. As soon as Kaito stepped inside, his eyes fell upon a figure that he had hoped not to see. Danzo sat in the dim corner of the Hokage's office like a splinter in the wood, small, rigid, and unbearable. His single eye was hidden behind bandages, his posture as authoritarian as ever, and a half-smile tugged at his mouth as if he enjoyed being everywhere trouble stirred. Around him the elders shuffled papers and spoke in low, clipped tones. Hiruzen stood by the window with that tired patience he wore like armor. For a heartbeat Kaito forgot how to breathe. Every memory, whispers, rumors, the way his mother had stiffened the first time she heard Danzo's name, returned like an old scar. He stepped forward before his brain had finished arguing with his heart. "Kaito-kun," Hiruzen said softly, as if he'd read the storm that had flashed across the boy's face. "Come. Sit. There's much to explain." Danzo's gaze flicked to Kaito. It was small, practiced, and cold. "So the Uzumaki boy who cut a man in half last week is back awake," he said, voice like paper scraping stone. "Your handiwork has caused several complications, Uzumaki. I trust you understand the delicacy required when dealing with foreign shinobi." Kaito's jaw clenched. He wanted to spit the truth, wanted to tell Danzo exactly what he thought of men who traded children and used shadows for their own ends, but Shikaku's hand on his shoulder grounded him. The Jonin's fingers were calm and firm. "Don't play the fool, not here." Hiruzen folded his hands and looked at Kaito with an old, careful kindness. "We have questions about what happened on the road," he said. "About the masked man, and about the Kumo, about root operatives moving within our borders. I understand you were involved." Kaito swallowed. Hotaru and Itachi were at his side, faces solemn. Hotaru's fingers found his without thinking. Itachi's eyes held concern like rain. He took a breath and recounted, without the fury, the salient facts, what he'd seen, what he'd done, how the masked man had slipped through a void in his mask. He told them how he'd run home, and how his mother and Naruto were unharmed. He spoke of the root Anbu's involvement, of the Kumo Jonin, and of the strange, terrible certainty that the masked man knew names he shouldn't. When he finished, the room was quiet except for the faint clink of Hiruzen's pipe. Danzo steepled his fingers and made that small inquisitive noise Kaito hated. "You say the masked man recognized Kakashi and mentioned Kushina," Danzo said slowly. "Curious. Very curious indeed." Shikaku barked a short laugh, half amusement, half warning. "If you have plans, Danzo, save them. Hiruzen-sama will decide how to proceed." Danzo's eyes moved to Kushina. She'd remained in the doorway at the edge of the chamber, clutching Naruto at her hip. For a moment something like surprise softened his face, then it was gone. "I only mean that this isn't random," Danzo replied. "There are strings to be pulled from outside and within. We must be thorough." Kaito's fists curled. The blood at his temples throbbed. He felt 18 different promises pressing at his teeth. He wanted to stand up and shout. He wanted to chase Danzo out and tear the truth from him. But Shikaku's steady presence and Hiruzen's old admonition, "Choose your wars, Kaito," kept him seated, silent. Hiruzen rose then, the pipe balancing in his hand like a ruler. "We will not rush," he said. "We will investigate. We will increase patrols and question every root and shadow we can touch. But we will also not start a war we cannot finish. Kumo will be notified that an internal matter occurred. We will cooperate where we must, and we will protect our people." Danzo inclined his head in a manner that was almost polite. "And if the masked man returns?" he asked. Hiruzen's eyes were steady. "Then we will be waiting." After the meeting, as the elders filtered out and hushed plans were made, Danzo lingered by the doorway. He spoke to Kaito once more, not loudly, merely enough for the boy to hear. "You've done well," he said, the compliment tasting like a threat. "But remember this, vengeance has a way of making children into weapons for other men's quarrels. Don't let your hatred control your blade." Kaito's hands balled into fists. "I won't be used," he said, voice low. "I'll make sure I'm the one pulling the strings." Danzo's smile was a line in the dark. "We shall see." Outside, the village hummed ordinary life, children chasing in the dust, vendors calling, the smell of frying noodles carried on the wind. It was a fragile cover for what had nearly been torn open. Kaito left the tower with Hotaru and Itachi flanking him. Shikaku trailed a little behind, consulting quietly with Kakashi. The three walked in silence for a time until Hotaru finally reached for Kaito's hand, thumb rubbing comfortingly across his knuckles. "You don't have to carry this alone," she whispered. Kaito looked at her, gratitude and pain mingling in his expression. "I know," he said. "But I won't let them hurt Mom again. Not ever." Itachi's voice was calm, steady. "We'll be there," he said. "When the time comes." Kaito nodded, and for the first time since the orange-masked man's shadow had fallen over their day, a small, fierce peace settled in him. The hunt had begun, yes, but it would not be his alone. Hiruzen froze mid-breath, his pipe halfway raised. The room went utterly silent. Koharu's eyes widened. Homura stiffened. Danzo's sneer sharpened like a blade. Behind Kaito, Itachi's breath hitched, barely audible, but both Hotaru and Shikaku noticed. Hotaru's eyes darted nervously between Kaito and the Hokage, while Shikaku pinched the bridge of his nose, muttering under his breath again, "Troublesome." Hiruzen set his pipe down with deliberate calm and leveled his gaze at the red-haired boy standing before him. "And what," the third asked quietly, "makes you think the Uchiha are being isolated?" Kaito didn't falter. His hands remained at his sides, but his voice held a steady conviction. "Ever since the Kyuubi attack," he said, "the Uchiha police force was pushed to the outskirts. Surveillance around their district increased. Missions assigned to them have become selective, restricted, and even the villagers whisper about them as if they caused the Ninetales attack." Itachi's eyes widened a fraction. Hotaru's grip tightened around her own sleeves. Even Shikaku finally looked up at Kaito in surprise. Kaito continued, tone respectful yet unwavering. "I understand being cautious, Hokage-sama. But suspicion without evidence? That only festers resentment. I believe isolating them is a mistake. It's unfair." Itachi lowered his gaze. The slightest tremble in his hands betrayed how much those words struck him. Koharu scoffed loudly. "You speak boldly for a child." Homura added, "The Uchiha hold dangerous power. Measures were necessary." Kaito frowned. Necessary to isolate an entire clan for the action of a masked man no one can even identify? A masked man who wasn't Uchiha at all. Danzo's lone visible eye narrowed to a slit. "Watch your tongue, boy." Kaito didn't even look at him. "I will, Danzo-sama, once you start addressing actual threats instead of creating new ones." Shikaku inhaled sharply. "Oh, for the love of, troublesome child." Hiruzen raised a hand, silencing everyone. His old eyes softened, barely, with something like regret. "Kaito," he began, "I understand your concern. I do. More than you know. But the village's security comes first. Until the masked man who controlled the Ninetales is discovered, certain precautions must remain." Kaito opened his mouth to argue, but Hiruzen cut him off gently. "You must trust that I am doing what I believe is best for Konoha. When the threat is gone, perhaps things can return to normal." His tone shifted, sad, burdened, and tired. "But until then, the situation stands as it is." It wasn't a refusal. But it wasn't a promise either. Kaito bowed slightly, respectful, though clearly unsatisfied. "I understand, Hokage-sama." Itachi silently released a breath he'd been holding. Hotaru watched Kaito with a worried look, knowing he would not let this go easily. Danzo, on the other hand, looked irritated that Kaito had dared to interfere at all. Hiruzen cleared his throat. "Unless anyone has anything further, Team 11 is dismissed." Shikaku didn't need to be told twice. "Team 11, let's go." Kaito turned to leave, but paused when Hiruzen spoke again. "Kaito-kun." Kaito glanced back. Hiruzen's eyes were thoughtful, probing. "Your loyalty to your family, and to your comrades, is admirable. But be careful." Kaito raised a brow. "Careful of what, Hokage-sama?" Hiruzen exhaled a long, weary sigh. "Of choosing enemies the village isn't ready to face." Kaito didn't respond. He simply bowed again and walked out. Danzo watched him go, fingers tapping against his cane. A long, calculating look followed Kaito until the door swung shut. For a heartbeat, the entire room froze. Danzo went rigid. Koharu's breath hitched. Homura's lips parted in shock. Even Hiruzen's eyes widened slightly, the pipe slipping from between his fingers and clattering softly onto the desk. Shikaku's hand dragged down his face in disbelief, muttering under his breath, "Oh for, troublesome kid." Itachi's eyes snapped toward Kaito in alarm, his pupils shrinking. Hotaru's hands instinctively clutched the sides of her skirt, her heart racing. Fugaku's expression hardened immediately, sharp, dangerous, the quiet fury of a clan head who had just heard something he was never supposed to hear. Danzo didn't move. Kaito didn't look away. What nonsense, Homura sputtered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Koharu shot Danzo a sharp look. Danzo? Danzo's jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck twitching beneath the bandages. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his head toward Kaito, his single visible eye narrowing to a murderous slit. "You overstep your place, boy," Danzo hissed, voice cold enough to frost steel. Kaito didn't flinch. "Do I?" he said calmly. He took a step forward, eyes locked on Danzo's covered right side. "Fugaku-sama just confirmed no one is permitted to use the Sharingan. No one except Kakashi-senpai," Kaito continued, tone even but unwavering. "But during our fight with the masked man, I sensed something very familiar. A faint trace of Uchiha chakra, but not from him." He raised a finger and pointed directly at Danzo. "It came from you." The advisor council erupted. "That is an outrageous accusation." Koharu snapped. "Have you lost your mind, Uzumaki?" Homura barked. "Control your student, Shikaku." Koharu demanded sharply. Shikaku lifted both hands, exasperated. "Trust me, I've been trying since day one." But Hiruzen didn't speak. Not yet. His gaze was fixed on Danzo, calculating, troubled, weighing truths he had ignored for far too long. Danzo's voice came out like poison. "Are you accusing me of stealing from the Uchiha clan?" Kaito shrugged lightly. "If the shoe fits, Danzo-sama." Itachi's hands clenched into fists at his sides, anger mixed with shock. Fugaku's expression grew darker by the second, his Sharingan flickering beneath the surface of calm. Danzo slammed the end of his cane against the floor with a sharp crack. "You insolent brat. I have served this village longer than you have been alive. I have sacrificed more than anyone ever asked you to." Kaito cut in coldly. Danzo froze mid-rant. Kaito stepped closer, his voice steady but edged with steel. "You talk about sacrifice, but everything you do only ever benefits you. Whether it's isolating the Uchiha, manipulating missions, or spreading rumors to justify your paranoia. And now, stealing an Uchiha's eye." He leaned in slightly. "Tell me, Danzo-sama, which Uchiha died for that Sharingan to end up in your socket?" A horrified silence swept through the room. Itachi looked down, breath unsteady. Fugaku's aura darkened like a storm rolling in. Shikaku muttered, "Oh boy, this is going to blow up." Danzo's teeth gritted audibly. "You dare insinuate?" "Kaito-kun." Hiruzen's voice finally cut through the tension, quiet but heavy. Kaito turned. The third Hokage stared at him, searching, conflicted, but not dismissing him. Fugaku spoke next, his voice low, controlled, but radiating fury. "Hokage-sama," he said, "if what this boy says is true, then the Uchiha clan demands an explanation." Danzo barked, "Preposterous. I will not dignify such child's lies." But this time, Hiruzen raised a hand. "Danzo." Something in his tone made even Danzo stop talking. Hiruzen leaned back slowly, eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. "Oh, remove your bandages." Danzo went still. So did everyone else. Kaito's gaze sharpened. Itachi inhaled sharply. Hotaru clapped a hand over her mouth. Shikaku whispered, "Troublesome." Fugaku's eyes gleamed, not with victory, but with the grim anticipation of truth. Danzo opened his mouth, ready to protest. But Hiruzen spoke again, firmer this time. "That is an order." Danzo's fingers tightened around his cane. The room's tension coiled tighter. The bandages around Danzo's right eye, slowly began to unravel. Danzo's body went rigid as the last strip of cloth fell away. The room froze. The bright, unmistakable red of a 3-tomo Sharingan glared back at everyone. Alive, active, and impossible for any non-Uchiha to legally possess. Koharu gasped. Homura stumbled back a step. Hiruzen's eyes widened, the pipe slipping from his fingers and hitting the floor with a dull clack. Itachi's breath hitched. Hotaru's hand flew to her mouth. Fugaku's Sharingan flared to life in a burst of fury. Shikaku simply muttered under his breath, "Troublesome. This is about to turn into a nightmare." Danzo snarled, his face twisting. "Shikaku! Release me at once." But Shikaku didn't even blink. The shadow stretching from his feet held Danzo firmly in place, forcing the elder to remain standing exactly where he was, exposed, cornered, and humiliated. Kaito crossed his arms, expression calm but unreadable. "So," he said quietly, "it wasn't a misunderstanding after all." Fugaku took a single step forward, voice trembling with contained rage. "Danzo, where did you obtain that eye? Answer me." Danzo's visible eye darted toward him, cold and furious. "I owe nothing to you, Uchiha." "You stole it," Fugaku growled. "No Uchiha gave you their permission. Not one." Danzo's lips curled. "The needs of the village supersede clan privileges." Kaito scoffed lightly. "Funny. You always say village, but somehow it ends up benefiting only you." "Watch your tone, boy," Danzo spat. "I'd rather not," Kaito replied. "Especially not with someone who implants stolen dojutsu into his face." Koharu struggled to speak. "Danzo, we were unaware." Homura wiped cold sweat from his brow. This could cause a clan crisis." Hiruzen remained silent. His face had gone pale. His hands trembled faintly at his sides. He looked older, far older, than he had a moment ago. Danzo sensed the shift. His voice grew desperate, sharp. "Hiruzen, do not let this child manipulate." "Silence," Hiruzen said quietly. Danzo shut his mouth instantly. Hiruzen's gaze lifted, slow and heavy, to meet Danzo's uncovered Sharingan. "Oh Danzo," he said softly, "you swore to me that you'd relinquished all unauthorized Sharingan artifacts." Danzo's jaw clenched. "For the sake of Konoha." "For the sake of yourself," Hiruzen snapped, voice cracking with a rare flash of anger. The room fell deathly silent. Kaito watched Hiruzen carefully, but saw no guilt, no shame. Only exhaustion. And fear. Fear of what this truth would unleash. Fugaku stepped forward again, his chakra rising like a storm. "Hokage-sama. This is an act of desecration. A theft of Uchiha blood. This cannot be brushed aside." Danzo struggled against Shikaku's shadow, but the Nara clan head only tightened the jutsu with a lazy sigh. "Don't move too much, Danzo-sama," Shikaku drawled. "You'll make my job harder." Kaito smirked internally. "Nice save, sensei." Hiruzen finally spoke, voice measured. "Danzo, explain yourself." Danzo's Sharingan glinted dangerously. "You want the truth?" he hissed. "Fine." After the Kyuubi attack, with Madara's shadow looming over the Uchiha once again, it was essential that I obtain every advantage possible to protect this village. Fugaku snarled. "By stealing our eyes." Danzo didn't even blink. "A single eye is a small price to pay for safeguarding Konoha." "So there was a theft," Kaito said quietly. "Thank you for confirming it." Danzo shot him a poisonous glare. Hiruzen closed his eyes, pain lacing his features. "Danzo, you've crossed a line even you cannot justify." Danzo barked a harsh laugh. "You are weak, Hiruzen. Just like Minato was weak. Just like the Uchiha trash who—" He didn't finish. Because Fugaku's chakra exploded. The air itself trembled. Even Itachi instinctively stepped back. "Finish that sentence," Fugaku whispered, voice deadly calm. "I dare you." Danzo smirked, but wisely remained silent. Shikaku sighed heavily, scratching the back of his head. Hokage-sama, your move. All eyes turned to Hiruzen. He looked at Danzo, then at Fugaku, then at Kaito. And finally, he exhaled, long, weary, defeated. Danzo Shimura, he said, voice firm despite the trembling in his hands, you will be placed under immediate investigation. Until then, you are stripped of all decision-making authority. Your root operatives will be suspended. And you are confined to the village under surveillance. Danzo went pale. You senile fool. Shikaku. Hiruzen barked. And Shikaku's shadow forced Danzo to his knees. The elder choked on his own rage. You betray the village, Danzo rasped. No, Hiruzen whispered brokenly. You betrayed it a long time ago. Kaito inhaled slowly, then exhaled in relief. He'd done it. He'd cornered Danzo publicly, where even Hiruzen couldn't protect him. But the look Danzo gave him, cold, piercing, filled with murderous promise. Kaito knew what it meant. This isn't over. As Danzo's bandaged eye was torn open and the crimson tomo spun into view, a suffocating silence swallowed the room whole. No one moved. No one spoke. Not even the Hokage. The Sharingan gleamed back at them, bright and unmistakably alive, proof that Danzo had crossed a line no one was allowed to cross. Hotaru gasped sharply beside Kaito, hands covering her trembling lips as she backed away. The terror in her eyes was genuine, raw. For someone who had nearly been kidnapped for her own dojutsu, this sight cut deep. Kaito gently reached out and took her hand, grounding her. On his other side, Itachi's fist was clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. His face was still, but the storm inside him was obvious. And behind him, Fugaku's Sharingan flared violently, his rage barely contained. Shikaku didn't so much as flinch. His jutsu held Danzo in place like a vice. Troublesome, this just got worse. Across the room, Koharu's voice cracked. Danzo, you're the masked man. Homura looked sick. It can't be. Kaito shook his head. He isn't. The masked man would mop the floor with Danzo. My father nearly killed the masked man. Danzo wouldn't last 5 seconds. He paused, letting the insult land. But stealing a Sharingan? That, Danzo is definitely capable of. Danzo shot Kaito a silent, venomous snarl. Kaito smiled, slow and mocking. I should thank you though. This finally proves the masked man got his Sharingan from someone like you. Kaito turned back to the Hokage. Also, the first time Danzo tried recruiting me, 2 years ago, he slipped up. He promised he could heal my mother if I joined Root. Even then, I sensed something off about his right eye. I didn't know it was a Sharingan back then. I do now. The room tensed further. Shikaku's eyes narrowed. Troublesome, so this old bastard tried poaching you too. His gaze slid to Danzo with cold contempt. And here I thought it was only Hotaru's kidnapping you orchestrated. Seems you've been busy. Fugaku's chakra spiked like a storm ready to strike. Hokage-sama, he demanded, voice trembling with fury, I require an explanation. Now. Hiruzen swallowed, visibly shaken. He had known about Danzo's questionable actions, but not this. Not a stolen dojutsu. Not an uchiha I gouged out without authorization. He turned to his longtime friend with a painful heaviness in his expression. Danzo, explain yourself. Danzo's single normal eye flashed with fury. I did this for Konoha, he barked. The Uchiha are a danger to the village. After the Ninetales attacked, we needed a countermeasure. You stole from our dead. Fugaku roared. You took what was sacred to our clan. Kaito added coldly, he also used for the village as an excuse to satisfy his own greed. He even lifted his fingers in sarcastic air quotes. Danzo lunged forward in rage, but Shikaku's shadow jerked him back like a puppet. Enough. Hiruzen's voice cracked across the room like a whip. He glared at Kaito, then turned back to Danzo. Danzo, I cannot overlook this. Not anymore. Danzo's breath hitched. Hiruzen. Think. You need me. The village needs. No. Hiruzen's tone was final. As of this moment, you are relieved of all command. You are placed under house arrest. And you will return the stolen Sharingan. Shikaku released the jutsu only when the Hokage signaled. Danzo staggered forward, eyes murderous. You weak old fool. Konoha will fall without me. Hiruzen snapped, Tora. An ANBU agent flickered into existence instantly and knelt. Remove the Sharingan, Hiruzen ordered. Danzo's eyes widened. Hiruzen. His scream tore through the office as Tora extracted the eye in one fluid, efficient motion. The Sharingan, now stripped of its owner, was placed reverently in Fugaku's hands. Fugaku bowed stiffly in acknowledgement, though his gaze remained dark with unspoken fury. Danzo panted heavily, clutching his bleeding socket as he glared at Kaito with murderous hatred. Kaito simply smiled. Danzo stormed out of the office, defeated, humiliated, and seething. You are dismissed, Hiruzen said, the weight of the world in his voice. Fugaku bowed stiffly and departed with Itachi. Shikaku bowed next, then ushered Kaito and Hotaru outside. Once they cleared the building, Shikaku sent a shadow clone to escort Hotaru to the Hyuga compound with a full explanation for the clan head. Then he guided Kaito alone to their isolated training ground. The minute they stopped moving, Shikaku turned, expression deadly serious. You did that on purpose, he said flatly. What you did was reckless and stupid. You just made an enemy of the most dangerous man in Konoha. Kaito didn't look away. You know I'm right, sensei. Shikaku exhaled sharply. Troublesome. Kaito continued. If the village keeps pushing the Uchiha into a corner, they're going to revolt. I only stopped the man pulling the strings. Shikaku pinched the bridge of his nose. You realize Danzo will now target you. And your mother. And Naruto. Kaito nodded. He already tried. He spread rumors about my mom being unstable. He leaked the Hyuga compound layout to Kumo. His ANBU attacked me and Hotaru that night. He won't stop. Shikaku's eyes widened slightly, surprised Kaito knew this much. Then we need to prepare. His voice dropped low. Meet me tomorrow morning. Alone. Kaito nodded, then vanished in a blur of movement, heading home, wondering how he would explain any of this to his mother. Chakra chains lashed across the chamber with a violent snap, slamming into Danzo's torso before he could even register what was happening. They wrapped around him like serpents of molten metal, pinning his arms to his sides with such force that the stone beneath his feet cracked. A cold blade kissed the side of his throat, so close that he dared not even swallow. Red lightning crackled along the Tanto's edge, humming with Kaito's fury. Danzo's lone eye widened. Root ANBU froze mid-step, unsure whether to advance or hold back. Kakashi stiffened, eye widening slightly behind his mask. Tenzo, still struggling to rise from the remnants of his shattered dome, stared in disbelief at the red-haired boy who had materialized out of nowhere with killing intent thick enough to suffocate. Kaito stood behind Danzo, breathing slowly, dangerously calm. His eyes glowed with murderous resolve as the chains emerging from the unseen seal on his back tightened, digging into Danzo's ribs. Say something, Kaito whispered, his voice low and eerily steady. I dare you. Danzo's teeth clenched. You, brat. Kaito pressed the blade harder, a bead of blood sliding down Danzo's neck. You nearly killed Kakashi, Kaito growled. Tried to steal Tenzo. And after everything you've already done? You really thought I wouldn't follow you here? A ripple of shock traveled through the Root ANBU. Not because Kaito had discovered their base, but because he had broken in undetected. Danzo's voice was strained, his composure cracking for the first time in decades. Release me, Uzumaki. You're interfering with Root business. Kaito leaned closer, his breath brushing Danzo's ear. Root business. A humorless laugh slipped out. Is that what you call kidnapping? Theft? Experimenting on children? Tenzo's eyes widened. Kakashi's fingers twitched toward his kunai. Kaito didn't care. You think you can threaten me, Danzo hissed, but you forget. I forget nothing, Kaito snapped, chakra flaring violently through the chamber. The lights dimmed as if shrinking away from him. I know exactly what you are. His chains yanked Danzo down to the dusty stone floor, forcing him to his knees. A gasp echoed from one of the root operatives. Even they had never seen someone handle Danzo like this. Kaito's blade lowered until it rested just above Danzo's heart. And I know exactly what I'll do if you ever touch Kakashi again. Danzo opened his mouth to bark an order. But Kaito's chain shot out, piercing the floor beside Danzo's face with a sound like thunder. The old war hawk froze. Kakashi finally spoke, voice low and unreadable. Or Kaito. Kaito didn't turn around. Back off, Kakashi. This is between me and him. Tenzo, still panting, looked between them frantically. Kaito, don't. Kaito didn't take his eyes off Danzo. Don't worry, Tenzo, he said softly. I'm not here to kill him. His grip tightened on the tanto. Not yet. Danzo felt the killing intent radiate from Kaito like a physical weight. It was suffocating. Unreal. Impossible for someone his age. But Danzo knew better than anyone how dangerous prodigies could be. You're playing a dangerous game, Danzo said hoarsely. Kaito's chains tightened again, pulling Danzo's shoulders back until his joints creaked. His expression hardened. No, Kaito whispered coldly. You are. The room remained frozen in stunned silence as everyone waited for what the boy would do next. The boy who had exposed Danzo, survived the masked man, and now held one of Konoha's most feared leaders helpless on his knees. Kaito raised his blade, lightning crackling brighter. And the entire underground base held its breath. Kakashi stiffened as if the ground beneath him had vanished. The breeze that drifted through the training field fell silent. For a long moment, Kakashi didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Didn't move. His single visible eye widened, not in shock, but in something far deeper, older, something closer to grief being forcibly dragged back to life. What did you say? Kakashi asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Kaito didn't look away. It's Obito. Kakashi's hand twitched near his kunai pouch, then stopped midair as if he wasn't sure whether to reach for a weapon or clutch at his own chest. He swallowed hard, his pulse spiking. That's not funny, Kaito, Kakashi said, voice trembling ever so slightly beneath the calm facade. Obito died. I watched the boulders fall on him. He gave me his Sharingan. He didn't die, Kaito cut in gently, but firmly. Not completely. He survived. Someone saved him. And now, he's that masked man. Kakashi's breath hitched. Kaito continued, his chakra feels the same, Kakashi. The same warmth. The same flare when he gets irritated. The same frequency. I felt it the night Naruto was born. I felt it again during the Daimyo mission. And when I fought him, even with the mask, even with whatever he's done to himself, it was him. Kakashi staggered back half a step, the world spinning around him. Memories crashed through his mind. Obito smiling, Obito arguing with him, Obito giving him that eye with blood and tears mixing on his face. But that can't. Kakashi's voice cracked before he forced it steady. Obito would never attack the village. He would never hurt Kushina. He would never. He thinks he's dead, Kaito said softly. He thinks you and Rin are dead too. Whoever saved him twisted him. Broke him. Kakashi closed his eye, and his breath shuddered as if he were trying to hold back a storm. Kaito stepped closer. Kakashi, I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know. Because you were his closest friend. Kakashi's fists clenched so tightly that his gloves strained. His voice came out low, hollow. Obito, alive? All this time. There was a long, suffocating silence. Finally, Kakashi forced himself to speak. How sure are you? Certain, Kaito answered without hesitation. Completely. Kakashi lifted his head slowly, his eye sharp and haunted. If that's true, then why? Why is he doing this? Why attack the village? Why help the Ninetales? Why kill? His voice cracked again, and he dropped it to a whisper. Why would Obito do this? Kaito's gaze softened. I don't know the full story. Not yet. But I'll find out. And when the time comes. Kakashi looked at him, pain and confusion swirling beneath the surface. Kaito finished quietly, I promise you won't face him alone. The silver-haired jonin stared at him for a long moment, silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. Then Kakashi exhaled, slow and broken, and whispered the name he hadn't said aloud in years. Oh, Obito. The wind picked up, rustling the grass around them. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Kakashi looked like a man who didn't know whether the past he buried had come back as a miracle or a nightmare. Kaito headed toward the bathroom, and the moment he slid the door shut behind him, the quiet settled in like a weight on his shoulders. He let out a long, shaky breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His hands hovered over the faucet for a second before he finally turned it on, steam beginning to fill the small room. As the warm water washed over him, the events of the day replayed in his mind. Danzo, Root, Kakashi, Obito. Everything felt like it was accelerating faster than he'd prepared for. The thought of Kakashi's expression when he'd said the name Obito made Kaito's chest tighten. That haunted, broken look. Kaito had seen fear before, anger, grief, but not that. That was the look of a man whose past had come back to life just to tear him apart. He scrubbed a hand over his face. Damn it, he whispered to himself. I hope he doesn't do anything stupid. Obito was strong, too strong. And Kakashi, even with all his skill and experience, wasn't ready for that confrontation. Not yet. And neither was Kaito, even if the adrenaline from earlier made him feel invincible in the moment. After a long shower, he dried off, put on his comfortable home clothes, and stepped out of the bathroom. The aroma of Kushina's cooking filled the house, a warm, comforting scent of simmering miso and grilled fish. It loosened the tension in his shoulders just a little. Kushina looked up from the stove with a gentle smile when he entered the kitchen. Feel better, honey? Kaito nodded, returning the smile. Yeah. Thanks, Mom. Naruto was already seated at the table, swinging his little legs excitedly as he waited. Mama, hurry. I'm hungry, he chirped, earning a fond laugh from Kushina. All right, Naru-chan, she said, placing bowls and plates on the table. Dinner's ready. Kaito sat down beside Naruto, ruffling his hair. Did you behave today? Naruto puffed his cheeks defiantly. I always behave. Kushina snorted. Kaito smirked. They ate together, laughing, talking, teasing. And for a moment, Kaito let himself forget the chaos waiting outside this home. For a moment, he let everything feel normal. Naruto spilled his rice twice, Kushina scolded him affectionately, and Kaito found himself smiling without forcing it. When dinner ended and dishes were cleaned, Naruto scrambled off to play in his room, leaving Kaito and Kushina alone in the quiet kitchen. She turned to him, drying her hands with a towel, her expression softening. You seem tired, she murmured. Kaito hesitated, then nodded. It's been a long day. Kushina stepped closer, gently placing a hand on his cheek. You don't have to carry everything alone, you know. Kaito swallowed. If only she knew. He forced a small smile. I know, Mom. I'm okay. She held his gaze for a long moment, too perceptive for her own good, then finally nodded, letting it go. All right. Get some rest, okay? Hi. He left her with another smile and headed to his room, closing the door quietly behind him. The moonlight filtered through his window, pale blue and soft, casting shadows on the floorboards. Kaito sat on his futon, leaning back against the wall as he stared up at the ceiling. His senses stretched outward instinctively, brushing against the familiar chakra of ANBU stationed nearby, Hiruzen's orders after the Danzo incident. He could sense them trying to mask their presence, but to him, they were bright as bonfires in the dark. The village was quieter tonight. Too quiet. Kaito let out a slow breath, then whispered to himself, "I need to get stronger. Fast." He closed his eyes. Training with Shikaku. Learning how to counter spacetime ninjutsu. Strengthening his seals. Preparing for Obito. Protecting Naruto. Protecting his mother. There was so much to do. His hand drifted unconsciously to his chest where he still felt the phantom weight of the seal he had used earlier. "Kakashi. Obito," he murmured. The image of Kakashi's tortured expression flashed again, and Kaito felt a deep ache twist in his chest. "I really hope this doesn't break him." His eyes finally drifted shut, exhaustion settling over him like a blanket. The soft murmur of his mother's voice from the next room lulled him into a light sleep, one he desperately needed, even if his mind refused to rest fully. Tomorrow would be a new storm. But tonight, for just a few fleeting hours, Kaito allowed himself peace. They ate until their chopsticks slowed and the steam from their bowls curled into the evening air. Naruto's cheeks were stuffed and happy, Kushina laughed as she wiped broth from his face, and for a few small, perfect hours Kaito let the world shrink to the size of that little ramen stall, warm, familiar, exactly as it should be. Between mouthfuls Kushina glanced at Kaito, worry tucked into the crease of her brow. "You were very brave today, Kaito-kun," she said softly, voice barely above the clink of bowls. "But promise me you'll be careful, okay? Danzo, he won't stop." Kaito met her eyes and gave the smallest of smiles. "I know, Mom. I'm not going to do anything reckless. I've got plans." He didn't tell her everything, how many nights he'd been lying awake thinking of seals and counter-spacetime techniques, how he'd watched Kakashi with a new, heavy concern. He tucked those things inside himself the way one tucks away sharp stones until they can be turned into something stronger. Naruto, oblivious to adult dangers, popped another dumpling into his mouth and announced between chews, "I'm going to be the Hokage and protect Mama and Kaito." There was a fierce, unspoiled certainty in the boy's voice that made Kushina's eyes shine and made something in Kaito ache in a good way and a terrible way at once. They left the stall as the street lamps flickered on, the village cooling down into night. Kaito kept his hand near the small pouch where he stored seals and notes, fingers brushing the cloth as if it were an anchor. He walked a little slower than usual, letting the night press close, listening, sensing. Root's shadow lingered like an echo in his thoughts, but tonight there was also another thread: Kakashi, Tenzo, Hotaru, Itachi, Shikaku. Allies. Not alone. When they reached the Uzumaki residence, Kushina paused on the porch, looking at her two sons, one a tired, solemn boy with a fierce jaw, the other a messy-haired sprite who refused to stop grinning about ramen. She wrapped an arm around each of them and pulled them close. For a long moment only the quiet passed between them, a tacit truce with the future's uncertainties. "Sleep well," she whispered. Kaito went to his room and sat at the edge of his futon, the noises of the house folding around him, Kushina humming softly, Naruto stifling yawns upstairs. The night felt heavy with possibility. He reached for a thin notebook he kept hidden beneath his mattress, the one he'd meant to use to chronicle everything he'd seen and done. The edges of its pages were still blank, a small reprimand and an invitation. He flipped it open and, in quick, careful strokes, wrote 2 short lines. Danzo exposed. Root still breathes. Prepare countermeasures. Teach Kakashi. Seal work. Protect Mom and Amp, Naruto. He closed the book and let his shoulders drop. Tomorrow he would meet Shikaku. There would be drills and plans and more questions than answers. He wanted to drag Kakashi into training, to force him into the kind of growth that might one day tip the scales. He wanted to learn every sealing art his mother could safely teach him, refine his Kagura's mind's eye until it was a blade. He wanted to become the thing the masked man would never expect. Sleep finally came, shallow at first and then deeper. Morning came too quickly. Kaito found Shikaku at the training ground before dawn, as promised, calm, already awake, steepled fingers tucked under his chin. The world smelled of frost and pine. Shikaku's eyes met Kaito's. "Troublesome," he said, though there was a steel under the usual resignation. "We need to accelerate everything," Kaito said. "Danzo will retaliate, and the masked man, whoever he is, will test us again. I want to be ready." Shikaku regarded him for a long moment and then nodded. "Then we begin today. You'll spar until you forget your own name. You'll run until your legs remember faster than your mind. And you will learn to hide yourself even when every sensor in Konoha looks for you." Kaito didn't flinch. He was already picturing the drills: shadow creation under stress, seals under duress, counter-genjutsu practices until the eyes ached. He felt a flash of gratitude for Shikaku's gruff, steady certainty. They set out the training plan like a march order: sealing matrices, chakra conservation sprints, anti-genjutsu patterns, simulated ambushes with Kakashi, each a small brick in a fortress Kaito intended to build around his family. As dawn burned into morning, the first of those bricks was laid. Elsewhere in the village, a different kind of planning began, dark and precise. Danzo, stripped of his outward authority but still coiled with purpose, gathered the few loyal Foundation members who hadn't yet fled to the shadows. His eyes, once bright with avarice, were now ice. "You struck in the open," he told them, voice low and dangerous. "You humiliated me. You showed my wound to the sun. That boy, Kaito Uzumaki, has teeth. He will pay." The men around him bowed their heads, not in fear but in calculation. Roots dig deep. When they do, roots often find the water that nourishes vengeance. Danzo had plans that would outlast the immediate storm. He had always believed ends justified the means. He believed, still, that the village needed measures that no one else would take. The first move would be small: information planted, a rumor, a slow erosion of trust. But the next could be sharper: an engineered accident, a theft, a whisper in the right ear. Danzo had patience. He was not yet finished. Back at the training ground, Kaito launched himself into the day, into the raw, honest labor of becoming more than the moment's fury. Shikaku watched and corrected, the older man's voice a steady counterpoint to the chaos Kaito carried inside. Shadow clones exploded into formations and disappeared. Seals that Kaito had only half-mastered flared to life in tidy, ruthless precision. Hotaru arrived mid-morning, offering Byakugan-guided drills. Itachi ran fire nature exercises, and Kakashi, when he came, brought silence and the weight of things unsaid. They worked until the sky bruised purple at the edges. When practice ended, Kaito stood with his chest heaving, muscles burning, the notebook under his arm. He was tired in ways sleep couldn't fix, but also alive in the way that only purpose can make you. Kakashi lay back on the grass, watching clouds. "You sound like a man who's seen too many things," he said quietly. "Maybe," Kaito admitted. "Or maybe I just refuse to let things happen to the people I love." Kakashi turned his head, one visible eye soft with something like understanding. "Then we'll make sure you don't have to do it alone." Kaito let that sit with him like a promise. The day closed with the village settling into its familiar rhythms: the laughter from market stalls, the rustle of leaves, the soft footfalls of ANBU on patrol. Kaito walked home with his notebook heavy in his satchel, but lighter somehow than the night before. He had plans, allies, a sensei who would not let him flounder. He had, most importantly, a family he would move heaven and earth to protect. And in the spaces between breaths, in the hush just before sleep, he rehearsed the one thing he would say to the masked man when they met again. Not a threat, not a vow, simply a truth. "Not today," he murmured into the dark. "Not ever." The moon answered him with cold light, and somewhere in the village someone else, hidden, patient, listened. Kakashi lay in the guest room for most of the night like a sleeping cat, limp, breathing slow, the left side of his face slack where the Sharingan used to glow. Kaito sat on the floor just outside the door, notebook open, tracing the faint seal lines Kushina had drawn in the air earlier. He kept replaying the moment the matrix latched onto Kakashi's temples, the way the chakra pushed against the edges of the eye, the way Kakashi's jaw had clenched, the soft, exhausted "I'm fine" that came out like a small lie. When dawn leaked through the curtains, Kakashi stirred. He blinked, flexed his left eyelid, and for the first time in months the world looked ordinary to him. He rolled his shoulders, sat up slowly, and gave Kaito that crooked, tired smirk. "You and your mom did really good work." Kaito couldn't help grinning. "It's only temporary. You'll still need practice. The seal drains your chakra when it activates and it takes a while to rebound. But now you can go days without burning out." He hedged the joy with caution. Kushina's warning about the seal's cost still echoed in his head. Kakashi swung his legs off the bed and looked Kaito in the eye. "We train. Not for me only, for Naruto, for Kushina, for anyone Danzo might target next." There was no drama in the sentence, just the simple, resolute steadiness of a jonin who'd been through too much to be surprised anymore. Kaito felt the small knot in his chest loosen. That resolve, shared, was the thing he'd wanted most. They ate a quiet breakfast while Naruto crashed into the kitchen with all the enthusiasm of a hummingbird. Kushina fussed over Kakashi like a mother does when someone's given away a piece of themselves. Boiling tea, extra rice, too many questions about whether he needed more rest. Kakashi answered most with a half-smile, but when Kushina asked if he'd told the Hokage about the masked man, he kept his face neutral and shook his head. "Not yet. We need hard proof, not just hunches." Kaito understood. It was another reason to keep the circle small. Shikaku arrived mid-morning, reading Kaito like a map. "Troublesome," he said, then steered them into the training ground. The plan was simple and brutal: conditioning for Kakashi to rebuild stamina under the seal, sealing drills for Kaito to refine the immobilization matrix, and anti-spacetime counters, simulated genjutsu and jutsu that tried to phase through attacks. Itachi and Hotaru joined. Itachi's presence was quiet, focused, a cold blade. Hotaru offered Byakugan-assisted corrections, watching chakra flows like a surgeon. Together, they tuned weaknesses into small, fixable problems. Word of Danzo's humiliation and the new sealing technique spread, as such things do, through whispers and worried looks. Kaito noticed the subtle change: fewer curious stares, more eyes that lingered just a touch too long at Kushina when she walked past the marketplace. Danzo, even under house arrest and humiliated, was still a shadow with followers. Kaito didn't sleep that night. He practiced seals on scraps of paper, rehearsed contingencies, and sketched out a chain of safe houses should the pressure on his family escalate. Before bed he wrote one more line in his notebook: "Protect them without baiting a war." That was the tightrope: do enough to survive, not so much to start a blaze. He folded the page over, put the book under his pillow, and let the day's fatigue catch up to him. Somewhere in Konoha, slim and patient as a spider, someone watched them move and began to plan their next small, poisonous step. Kaito felt it in the back of his neck like a distant itch. He tightened his grip on tomorrow's plan and let sleep come. And that wraps up today's episode of What If Naruto Had a Big Brother. Kaito's journey is only getting more intense, and the future of the ninja world is changing with every step he takes. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see what happens next, make sure to hit that like button, share the video with other Naruto fans, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an update. Drop your theories in the comments. I love reading them. See you in the next episode.